Warning, this video contains descriptions that some viewers may find upsetting. Viewer discretion is advised. There is a brick building in the Old Town neighborhood of San Diego, California. It has stood there since 1857. It is a two-story Greek Revival structure with white columns, wide wooden floorboards, and rooms that have been staged to look exactly as they did in the 19th century. There are period dresses hanging in wardrobes. There are reading glasses resting on an open journal. There is a cane propped beside a top hat as though its owner just stepped out for a moment, though some say the owner is still there. The Whaley House is not just widely regarded as the most haunted building in America. It is one of only two structures in the state of California that the United States Department of Commerce has officially recognized as haunted. The history behind it is soaked in violence, grief, and the kind of accumulated suffering that creates the conditions for something to stay behind when the living are gone. And it all started 5 years before the Whaley House was even built, with a man most people in San Diego in 1852 simply called Yankee Jim. James Robinson arrived in San Diego in the summer of 1852. Accounts differ on whether he was Canadian or Australian by birth, but most historians place him as a former sailor who had made his way through California during the gold rush years, picking up the nickname Yankee somewhere along the way. He was known as a horse thief and a drifter who could not stay out of trouble, and when he rode into San Diego, he brought his habits with him. Robinson and two accomplices decided to steal a rowboat from San Diego Bay. It was a simple plan, and it failed almost immediately. He was captured, beaten badly, and thrown into a local adobe jail. The trial that followed was far from impartial. Two of the men sitting on his jury were the same men who owned the boat he had tried to steal. The judge, Benjamin Hayes, was reportedly drunk during much of the proceedings. Yankee Jim was found guilty of grand larceny and sentenced to death. He reportedly laughed when the verdict was read, refusing to believe that anyone would actually hang a man for stealing a rowboat. He stopped laughing when he saw the rope. On September 18, 1852, James Robinson was walked from the jail to the gallows site, a yard directly across from the El Campo Santo Cemetery on what is now San Diego Avenue. The gallows were a crude, improvised structure built onto the back of a mule-drawn wagon. Catholic priests administered his last rites. Robinson was permitted to give a farewell speech to the crowd that had gathered, and then the noose went around his neck. The executioners had not calculated for his 6'2" height. When the mule cart was pulled away, Yankee Jim's toes grazed the ground. There was no quick, clean drop. Instead, he swung. A local newspaper account recorded that he kept his feet on the wagon as long as he possibly could, and when he was finally pulled off, he swung back and forth like a pendulum until he strangled to death. The process took somewhere between 30 and 45 minutes. One of the men standing in the crowd that day watching Yankee Jim die was Thomas Whaley. 3 years later, in 1855, Thomas Whaley purchased the lot where the hanging had taken place. He was a businessman, a New Yorker by birth who had come west during the gold rush, made connections in San Francisco, and eventually settled in San Diego. He wanted to build something permanent in this growing city, something that would house both his family and his commercial ambitions. He described his future home in a letter as the handsomest, most comfortable and convenient place in town or within 150 miles of here. Construction completed in 1857. The Whaley House was the first two-story structure in San Diego and the first brick building in Southern California. Thomas moved in with his wife, Anna Alois Delaunay Whaley, and their two children. The house had a general store in the front. It was beautiful, modern, and substantial. Thomas Whaley was proud of what he had built, and then, almost immediately, he heard the footsteps. Thomas Whaley described the sounds in his own journal. He heard the heavy tread of boots moving through the upstairs rooms and along the hallway when no one else was in the house. He described them as sounding as though they were made by the boots of a large man. He came to his own conclusion about who that man was. He wrote that he believed the footsteps belonged to Yankee Jim Robinson. The sounds never stopped. They continued throughout the entire time the Whaley family lived in the house, and they continue to be reported by visitors and staff to this day. Employees of the museum there today have grown so accustomed to the heavy footsteps on them that it barely registers as unusual anymore. What is notable is the location of those sounds. The archway between the parlor and the study, the spot where visitors often report a sudden choking sensation when passing through, is the exact location where the gallows wagon stood on the day Yankee Jim was hanged. The house was built around the ghost before the ghost was even in the house. Thomas Whaley was not deterred. He pressed on, expanded his business, and brought more life into the building, but the tragedies came quickly and without mercy. 5 months after moving in, Thomas and Anna suffered horribly as they lost their infant son. The boy, Thomas Jr., died of scarlet fever inside the house in 1858. He was 1.5 years old. Visitors to the Whaley House have reported hearing a baby crying in the upstairs rooms for well over a century. They report the sound of tiny feet pattering across the wooden floors of the hallway. A small dog has been seen moving through the same rooms, a dog that no one at the museum owns and no one can account for. Former curators of the house have noted that children who come on tour sometimes wave at something in the parlor that the adults accompanying them cannot see. The family was struck hard by the loss of the baby, but life continued. Thomas expanded the house's functions. The first floor became San Diego's second county courthouse, with a curved railing installed across the main room and a judge's stand placed behind it. An upstairs bedroom was converted into San Diego's first commercial theater. The Whaley House, for a time, was the beating civic heart of Old Town. It housed a general store, a courtroom, a theater, and a family all at once. By 1870, merchants and institutions began moving south to the newly developing area that would become the Gaslamp Quarter. Old Town was being abandoned. Business at the general store collapsed. The theater troupe disbanded after their operator, Thomas Tanner, died unexpectedly. For the first time in its history, the Whaley House fell quiet. The quiet did not last peacefully. In 1871, while Thomas was away on a business trip, a group of armed men arrived at the house and held Anna Whaley at gunpoint on the staircase. They were there to seize the county courthouse records stored on the premises and relocate them to the new town government offices. Anna was alone when it happened. The men took what they came for and left. Staff at the museum have noted over the years that the 9th step of the staircase, which is where Anna was standing when she was held at gunpoint, produces a persistent cold spot that does not correspond to any draft or gap in the structure. Visitors describe an overwhelming feeling of dread concentrated on that one step. The family spent time in San Francisco during some of these difficult years, renting out portions of the house for income. An earthquake in 1868 drove them back to San Diego. Thomas continued trying to recover his finances and his standing in the community, but the house was pulling more tragedy toward it. On January 5, 1882, Thomas and Anna hosted a double wedding at the Whaley House. 2 of their daughters were married on the same day. The younger daughter, Violet Alois Whaley, married a man named George Bertolacci. The marriage appeared happy on the surface for a short time. Then Bertolacci revealed himself in a letter to Violet shortly after the ceremony. He was a con man. He had pursued and married Violet specifically with the hope of inheriting some portion of the Whaley family wealth. Once it became clear that no inheritance was coming, he abandoned her. The divorce that followed destroyed Violet socially in the Victorian context of the time, where a divorced woman carried a stigma that was nearly impossible to escape. Violet Whaley descended into a deep depression. The humiliation of the failed marriage, the culture of the era, and whatever private anguish she was carrying in the house where she had grown up all converged on August 19, 1885. Violet went into the backyard of the Whaley House and shot herself in the chest with her father's .32 caliber pistol. She was 22 years old. The note she left behind has survived, she wrote. Mad from life's history, swift to death's mystery, glad to be hurled anywhere out of this world. The figure of a young woman has been seen repeatedly on the 2nd floor of the Whaley House ever since. She is described as deeply sorrowful in appearance, lingering near the rooms where she once lived. Even when she is not seen directly, visitors describe an oppressive sadness in certain parts of the upstairs, a weight that has no architectural explanation. A former employee of the museum stated that the grief in that area of the house is unlike anything she had experienced in over 2 decades of working there. Thomas and Anna Whaley lived with all of this. They remained in the house and continued to endure. Thomas Whaley died in 1890. Anna died in the house on February 24, 1913, at the age of 80. Their son Francis died in 1914. Their daughter Corinne Lillian remained in the house until 1953, when she died there as well. She was the last Whaley to inhabit the building. Several members of the Whaley family died within those walls, and according to the accounts that have accumulated over the following decades, appear to have remained. Thomas Whaley has been seen on the 2nd floor, at the top of the staircase, looking down at visitors below. He is described as wearing a black coat and a wide-brimmed hat. Some visitors have reported the smell of cigar smoke appearing and disappearing in areas where no one is smoking. Others standing near his study have encountered a figure standing very still, watching. Staff members who have worked at the museum for years describe him as a brooding presence, not violent but intensely aware. He is the owner of this house, and whatever part of him remains has not relinquished that sense of ownership. Anna Whaley presents differently. She is the most frequently encountered spirit in the building, and she is consistently described as warm. Visitors see her in the downstairs rooms, in the parlor, and sometimes in the garden outside. She has been reported sitting on a couch in a long green gingham dress. The scent of French perfume appears frequently in the rooms she is associated with. In 1964, while filming a segment for a local San Diego morning program, television personality Regis Philbin visited the Whaley House and claimed a direct encounter with Anna Whaley. He stated publicly afterward that something was unquestionably happening in that house, that the presence he felt was too real to dismiss. Keys on an antique organ in the parlor have been observed pressing down on their own, producing notes with no one near the instrument. Crystals on a lamp in the music room have been seen swaying independently, while adjacent crystals remain perfectly still. Ground floor windows, which have since been sealed, were repeatedly found open in the early years of the museum's operation, triggering alarms. Nothing structural or mechanical ever explained why they kept opening. A small girl has also been seen throughout the building. She is believed to be a granddaughter of Anna Whaley, though her identity has never been firmly established. She has been encountered in the kitchen, in the backyard, and in the hallways. A former curator recalled a young visitor, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, who waved at a man standing in the parlor. The adults in the room saw nothing. The building has also generated experiences that are harder to categorize. Archaeologists from San Diego State University conducted a field excavation on the property between 2007 and 2011 and recovered Whaley family artifacts from the soil, including pottery fragments, china pieces, and antique medicine bottles. One of those bottles still contains an unidentified liquid. It is not water, which would have evaporated. It is not alcohol. It does not appear to be oil-based. Nobody knows what it is. A doll named Cordelia, housed in one of the exhibit rooms, has attracted its own persistent cluster of reports. Visitors and staff describe the doll's position shifting between visits, and some have photographed what they describe as a mist or shadow near it that does not appear in the room to the naked eye. Whether or not one attributes that to the paranormal, the doll has become one of the more quietly unsettling objects in a building full of them. The Whaley House was never truly abandoned between the death of the last Whaley resident in 1953 and its opening as a museum in 1960, because restoration workers and caretakers were in and out of it continuously. Every one of them reported something. Joki Tolentino, who worked at the Whaley House for more than 20 years, stated in interviews that her decades inside the building gave her no doubt about its nature. She described personal paranormal encounters that accumulated gradually over her time there, experiences that she did not seek out and could not explain away. She also noted something that Thomas Whaley himself was a spectator of the formal execution of Yankee Jim Robinson, and then he went and built his house on the spot where it happened. He told his children about Yankee Jim. His daughter Corinne Lillian Whaley confirmed that her father attributed the haunting of the archway between the parlor and the study specifically to the spot where Robinson's neck was broken. That archway still stands. Visitors still stop there. Some of them feel a sudden constriction in their throat when they pass through it. The Whaley House became California Historical Landmark number 65. It stands at 2476 San Diego Avenue, and it has never stopped accumulating accounts. The Whaleys built their lives in that building across a span of nearly a century. They buried their grief in it. They died in it. And by every account collected from the time Thomas Whaley first picked up his pen to write about the footsteps in 1857, they have never truly left it. It is a museum you can visit today, but be warned, none of the empty rooms are unoccupied. Subscribe to Paranormal Depths for the strangest and most compelling cases from around the world.